This video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Hey, what's going on everyone? Greg here, and this is a topic that actually comes up a lot more than I thought it would. And that is when people ask me if they should buy an iMac or something like the MacBook Pro. And in the past, that used to be a pretty simple question to answer. Because if you wanted more power, you were better off going with a desktop computer like the iMac, and if you wanted less power but more portability, you were better going off with a portable option like the MacBook Pro. However, now that we have the M1 chip, or at least all the computers that we're talking about today have the M1 chip, that question is now significantly harder to answer because both of those machines now share a lot of similarities. So I think a lot of people are going to look at the M1 MacBook Pro and the M1 iMac, look at their very similar starting price points, look at the similar specifications from the M1 chip to the available memory to the storage, and walk away with the conclusion that they should just get a MacBook Pro. However, I'm here to tell you why you should buy an iMac over a MacBook Pro. Now, first, we need to come to one very significant conclusion, and that is that you don't need a portable machine. Now, this might sound like a weird reason to mention. You would think most people buying a laptop are buying it so they have portability options, but you would be surprised how many people I've seen in the comment section or people I have talked to personally that say that they have a portable device like a MacBook Pro and that whenever they used it, it's always plugged in, closed, and connected to an external monitor. And they'll maybe use it like a couple of times throughout the year in a portable situation. Well, if that sounds like you, do you really need a portable computer, one that you rarely use in laptop mode? I think a lot of people would just be better off going with a desktop solution, especially if you already have devices that can fulfill the role of a portable MacBook. Say maybe you have an iPad or even your phone. Do you really need the portability of a MacBook for those rare instances when you'll be taking those on a trip or just somewhere else? Can you already do all of those tasks on devices that are more capable than they were 5 to 10 years ago when having a laptop seemed mandatory? So you really need to ask yourself, do you still need a portable laptop? Okay, now while traditional desktops have better I/O connections, that isn't necessarily true this time around because the base model of the iMac still has the same Thunderbolt connections as the regular MacBook Pro, just 2 Thunderbolt ports. However, while you may have to pay a bit more, at least on the iMac, you do have the option to get 2 additional USB-C ports and a gigabit Ethernet port in the power brick on the mid-tier and up models, while right now the M1 MacBook Pro is limited to just 2 connections, and you have to account that at least one of those connections may be taken up by the charging port. Well, on the iMac, there's no need for any charging to be had, so you get full access to those 4 USB-C ports, and hey, an Ethernet port is not a bad thing to have. On top of that, the MacBook Pro has also lost an exclusive feature that might have had you pick it over an iMac in the past. That's because the M1 iMac is finally catching up to the MacBook Pro by adding Touch ID built into the keyboard. Again, provided you get the right model. But now that the keyboard on the MacBook Pro and the iMac are pretty much the same at this point, there's really no reason to go for the MacBook Pro for that Touch ID sensor. Now, I think one of the most obvious benefits of why you would choose the iMac over the MacBook is that the iMac comes with a bigger 24-inch display. Well, 23.5 inches to be exact, but whatever. It's a bigger display than the 13.3-inch display found on the MacBook Pro, and it's a beautiful display too. It has a super sharp 4.5K resolution, a very bright 500-nit panel, P3 wide color for more accurate and wide-ranging colors, and the 24-inch size is a pleasing screen size to work off of, even with just one monitor. Now, yes, I know what you're thinking. Greg, I could get a MacBook Pro and an external monitor. Well, here's the problem with that. If you want the same quality and caliber as the iMac's display, one that lives up to that Apple display reputation, well, good luck finding a similar panel with the same resolution, color accuracy, and brightness for anything below $1,000. The closest is probably the LG Ultrafine 4K 24-inch monitor, which does retail for $700 and has the same brightness as the iMac display, and its color and calibration closely match the iMac display because this monitor is kind of a partnership between Apple and LG, but even with that, it gets close, but it doesn't completely deliver, with it not being as sharp as the 4.5K iMac display because it has a 4K resolution in the same screen size, and the iMac panels just seem to be a little bit better color tuned and has a better, more even backlighting panel with less light bleeding, as well as not having some of the issues that have affected some of my LG ultrafine monitors, like temporary image retention as the display ages. Like, look, I have two of these LG ultrafine displays, and trust me when I say that the display quality is close to a Mac display, but it's not 100% there. Now, while the MacBook Pro shares pretty much the same specifications on the display side, the iMac is just a much bigger display to work off of, making it ideal for a workstation setup with a bigger canvas for multitasking, video editing, photo editing, and more. It's a huge jump up from the 13-inch display. You should also consider if you want a multi-monitor setup, because currently the M1 Macs can only connect to one external display at a time, with the exception of the Mac Mini. So while the iMac already has a 24-inch monitor, for the MacBook Pro, you can only connect one big external monitor at a time. So if you need two larger monitors, the M1 iMac is going to be better in this scenario here, because if you hooked up the MacBook Pro, you would just get the 13-inch display and then whatever size monitor you hooked it up to. Now, there's a few more things you need to know about why I think you should pick an iMac over a MacBook, but no matter what computer you use or whatever device you use, you also need to make sure that you have a secure and fast VPN, like our sponsor for this video, Surfshark VPN. Listen, there are a lot of VPNs out on the market today, but Surfshark is a step above others that has some of the fastest VPN connection speeds on the market. And it's also easy to use on every single device you own with just one subscription, so you can stay safe when accessing public Wi-Fi spots on your phone or when you're browsing the web at home. You can do that all securely on any operating system like Mac, iOS, Windows, Android, and more. Not only is Surfshark easy to use, but it also comes jam-packed with features, letting you pick which country to use as a virtual network, letting you bypass artificial geo-blocking content. So that means you can get past censored web content in some countries or access other large catalogs of content. For example, Netflix has separate country libraries which are different depending on which country you log in from, like Japan's huge library of exclusive shows. And Surfshark is also safe, secure, and private because it maintains a strict no logs policy, so they never keep your data, and it's all backed up by industry-leading encryption. Best of all, Surfshark has a special code just for Greg's Gadgets viewers that will give you an 83% discount off a plan and 3 extra months of service for free. You can get this all by clicking the link in the description, so make sure you check out Surfshark VPN, and thank you so much to Surfshark for sponsoring this video. Now, before we talked about the amazing display that you get with the 24-inch iMac, but that's not all you get, because you also get some of the best inbuilt speakers that I have ever heard on any product. And that's not something you can say about most monitors. A lot of monitors don't even have speakers, and if they do have speakers, they're usually low volume, tinny, and just lack any detail in the sound. On other monitors, they're just a complete afterthought, while on the iMac, Apple put way more effort into making these sound good enough that you won't have to pair external speakers, and they provide a nice room-filling sound, and even the spatial audio feature on Dolby Atmos movies really does immerse you and lets you pick out the area of where certain sounds are. Don't get me wrong, we are talking about the MacBook Pro here as well, and overall the MacBook Pro does have some pretty good speakers, but they don't quite have the loudness and punch that these iMac speakers have. Again, these are really good. Another thing that you might overlook is the webcam, because you might be looking at the tech spec page on both of these products and go, well, MacBook Pro has a webcam, the iMac has a webcam. However, the iMac webcam has a higher 1080p resolution compared to the 720p webcam found on the MacBooks, and it delivers a much better image quality than what you would find on those infamously bad MacBook webcams. I also think the webcam is at a better angle than how the MacBook is traditionally set up, and the iMac has a webcam that is slightly above eye level, while the MacBook webcam, you kind of have to look down at it. So I think the iMac is just a little bit more flattering here. Now, what about power? Is there any advantage to picking a desktop iMac over the MacBook Pro, especially when both models now have the same chip? Now, yes, one thing you need to be made aware of is that there are two different iMac models. One is technically weaker because it has one less GPU core and a weaker cooling system than the $1,500 mid-tier model. However, despite that, no matter what model you pick, you will actually see some performance advantages. In my testing, in a stress test of exporting a 10-minute 4K video to H.265, the mid-tier model with two fans finished the fastest, exporting the clip in 6 minutes and 34 seconds, while the base model iMac with the same test finished at 7 minutes and 7 seconds, and the MacBook Pro took the most time, exporting the file in 8 minutes and 2 seconds. So even though both of these machines have an M1 chip, in my test, there is a slight power advantage to getting a desktop form factor with the M1 iMac. So if every ounce of power really matters to you, you should go for the iMac. Now, yes, don't get me wrong. Is the iMac for everyone? No, of course not. Laptops are the most popular form factor for macOS for a reason. And most of the people watching this are going to need or prefer the portability of a MacBook Pro over the stationary setup of an iMac. However, if you don't need that portability, there are still a lot of benefits for going with an iMac. And if you were to get those same benefits on a MacBook Pro, like a bigger display, better external speakers, a better webcam, well, you're going to be adding significantly to the cost of your MacBook Pro setup. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I'm giving up my MacBook Pro and external monitor combo and switching over to the M1 iMac myself, because I much prefer working on the all-in-one setup for editing my videos. All right, everyone, but those are my reasons why I think you should get an iMac over the MacBook Pro. Now, I'm very interested to hear what you think in the comments below, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of disagreement here, and I'm sure there's some reasons I didn't consider why you should choose one over the other. So let's talk about it in the comments. Also, if you like this video, make sure you give me a like. If you want to see more from the channel, make sure you're subscribed. Also, don't forget to check out our sponsor for this video, Surfshark VPN, in the description below. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care, everyone.